Welcome to the Philosophemes channel. In this seminar, we will discuss Søren Kierkegaard's idea of seriousness and sincerity toward death. All right, in terms of an overview of this seminar, we're going to take a look at what the word that is translated for Kierkegaard is earnestness, and earnestness means seriousness and sincerity. So because the term is kind of not really used anymore, I decided to just go ahead and use seriousness and sincerity, even though it's more of a mouthful and somewhat of a sibilance. 4 aspects to earnestness toward death, then, are 1, owning one's death, and this is a essential and central theme of existentialism. If you recall from the episode on existentialism versus Stoicism, this is sort of a defining feature of, or it's definitely a defining feature of existentialism. Affirming the truth of death's inevitability, affirming the uncertainty of death's arrival, and managing the fear of death. We're then going to have a discussion of this. I would like to make 3 comments on being toward death from Heidegger, and then mention the 5 remembrances from Buddhism. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. I thought this quote from Kierkegaard was a nice way to title this slide. People want to shove away the thought of death and shove death out of life as much as possible. People desire to live as if there were no death. So Kierkegaard believes we should think of death daily in order to establish an earnestness toward death. And there are 4 aspects to this seriousness and sincerity toward death. We already just went over them, but again, owning one's death, affirming the truth of death's inevitability, affirming the uncertainty of death's arrival, and managing the fear of death. All right, so in regard to the first, we're going to go through each of these. Owning one's death. This means not thinking about death in general, but thinking about the death that will most likely be yours, based on how you live and who you are, right? Based on your choices. In this way, it is as if we earn our death. In a way, that is, your death may become your own. The idea here is that, well, let's go through all of them and then we'll discuss them. Affirming the truth of death's inevitability means it is certain that you will die. Humans are mortal. No matter what you do, you cannot escape death. You must die. There is no escape from this inevitability. Affirming the uncertainty of death's arrival means that though it is certain that you will die, it is not certain when or how you will die. Keeping this in mind helps us more sincerely relate to every moment. Kierkegaard suggests we treat every day as our last. This also works for meals. Sometimes, I think that it also can get you into overeating if you're not careful, but sometimes treating each meal as though it is your last helps you really taste the food. Managing the fear of death means neither fearing death too much nor fearing death too little. In the middle, like an Aristotelian virtue. So the golden mean here. This aspect is needed in order for the other aspects to fully affect us. And it is affecting us that we're interested in here. Remember, these are existential philosophers. They're affirming of passion. All right, so If death is not appropriately feared, that is, not feared enough, then it is possible to think death is better than life. For example, when people think of death as a peaceful sleep, they may become suicidal. Thinking death is better than life and desiring peace, for example. If death is feared too much, then a person might conspire with death to attack a life with which they are unhappy. For example, people may become suicidal in this way by reaching for death to destroy a life understood as unfair or unjust. I'm gonna have an episode on suicide in regard to Schopenhauer, and most likely also in regard to samurai philosophy. But for now, this is our first brush with the idea of suicide. All right, the mystery of life. This quote gets floated around, sometimes associated with Kierkegaard, sometimes not associated with Kierkegaard. I like this quote so much, I thought it was good to just go ahead and read it. The mystery of life is not a problem to be solved. It is a reality to be experienced. The mystery of life. To treat life as if it were something that can be solved or fixed, like a problem, is to relate to a representation or a representation of life, not life itself. Life itself is a mystery. To treat the mystery of life as a problem is to relate not to reality, but rather to an anxiety-based negation of reality. When we talked about nihilism, right, we talked about this idea that that the will to power is different from the will to truth, for example, to use Nietzsche's vocabulary here. So to treat the mystery of life as a problem is nihilistic. And this is also echoed in the philosophy of Gabriel, the existentialist, the French existentialist Gabriel Marcel, later on. Okay, death cannot explain itself. The observer must explain it to himself. What I really need, this is a great Kierkegaard quote in my opinion, and I feel as though it's difficult maybe at first to fully grasp. But so what I really need is to get clear about what I must do, not what I must know, except insofar as knowledge must precede every act. What matters is to find a purpose. The crucial thing is to find a truth which is truth for me, to find the idea for which I am willing to live and die. I think that this is intimately related to owning your death, acknowledging who you are in the world, acknowledging what it means to exist in a world, and then choosing the path that you will take from where you are, and acknowledging that eventually that path will lead to your death. All right, so here are some comments from Martin Heidegger, and this comes from the history of the concept of time. The mode of being of falling is also a covering up. It operates by way of a reinterpretation, not letting itself see what death is. We're talking about this mode of falling. But this still implies a constant seeing beforehand, so that what it conceals in it is its own being. The inconspicuous concern of not thinking about death covers up a basic character in it, namely its certainty. This certainty is reinterpreted into uncertainty by means of the ambiguity of everyone dies someday, a statement about death which is really addressed to no one. So this idea that there is a mode of being, for example, a mode of being in the world. Heidegger calls this mode of being, there are multiple modes of being in the world, but Heidegger calls this mode of being falling. And it is a mode of concealment. It is a mode of covering up. And what it covers up is its own being. How does it cover up its own being? It covers up its own being by denying death. So again, this is one of the reasons why seriousness and sincerity toward death is so important for the existentialists, because it's through that seriousness and sincerity toward death that one's being, one's authentic being, is revealed to oneself. Thus, death reveals itself as that possibility which is one's ownmost, non-relational, and unsurpassable. As such, death is something distinctively impending. Its existential possibility is based on the fact that Dasein, being there, being here, is essentially disclosed to itself. Being is disclosed to itself, and disclosed indeed as ahead of itself. This item in the structure of care has its most primordial concretion in being toward death. So the idea is that being toward death is one of these ways in which we can be ahead of ourselves. Living with a futural mode of being is inevitable, right? We're always oriented toward the future. When we orient toward death in the future, and not death in general, but our death, the death that we are appropriating, then what is revealed to us is a kind of certainty. And this is a certainty that then surpasses Descartes' certainty, right? It's not I think, therefore I am. It's I will die, therefore I am, right? And I am, therefore I am thinking. Lastly, that in the face of which, and last quote and this quote are both from Being and Time, of course, that in the face of which one has anxiety is being in the world itself. That about which one has this anxiety is simply being there, or being there's potential for being. Anxiety in the face of death must not be confused with fear in the face of one's demise. This anxiety is not an accidental or random mood of weakness in some individual, but as a basic attunement of Dasein, it amounts to the disclosedness of the fact, the revelation of the fact that Dasein exists as being thrown toward its end, or as thrown being toward its end. So again, this is a revelation of our fundamental being by way of the certainty of death. So the Five Remembrances, I find these to be just absolutely tremendous. It had been a while. I wrote a book on Eastern existentialism in 2017, and I've always the icon or the logo for the channel actually came to me in a vision when I was writing that book, the 2017 book. And that book has always had a special place in my heart. And the time during which I was writing that book was just a really tremendous time to be, what a blessing to be able to spend so much time so close to Zen philosophy and so close to the Eastern existentialists. In either case, I hadn't, the point of this is that I hadn't been able to return to it because I've been busy with so many other things, but in returning to it, I was deeply moved. I was sitting on the porch, it was late at night, and I was reading some of these quotes from some of these Eastern masters, and I was just so moved by them. In fact, so much so that I thought, wow, I hope I'm not moved on camera like that. I won't allow myself to be. So anyway, here we go. The Five Remembrances. First, I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. Second, I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. Third, I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. 4, all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. The alternative translation, everything that I cherish and value today, I shall have to be separated from in the future. And then lastly, I inherit the results of my actions, of body, speech, and mind. My actions are my continuation. This is, of course, about karma. The alternative translation, my only true inheritance is the consequences of my actions, of body, speech, and mind. My actions are the ground on which I stand. So what is or the existentialist teaching on death? As a finite being, you cannot truly be or see yourself without contemplating death. This is the existentialist teaching. Why is that the case? Because the certainty that is inherent in that being toward the future, in that being ahead of itself, is revelatory for being of being. So therefore, you cannot truly be or see yourself without contemplating death. I think seeing yourself. And then the idea is that when you're able to see your authentic self, it's from that authentic self that you are supposed to move toward death, right? Making choices in life toward death. The samurai philosophers just nail this. I mean, they're absolutely on point and brilliant with this. The only way to consciously take hold of your will to power is to realize your mortality and thereby the nature of the time in which you find yourself, right? So the idea is that, going back to the Heidegger notion of being thrown, right, is that you are on a trajectory from your birth to your death. It is as though you are thrown, and rather than saying thrown in the world, which is true that you're thrown into a world, there is a sense in which you are thrown through a world, right? The idea being that the end of the throw is your death. The trajectory of the throw that you're on is characterized by time, but ultimately ends in your death. So if you are unable to realize that you have a limited amount of time and that you are on this trajectory that is headed toward death, if you're unable to realize that, then you just don't realize the truth of existence. You don't realize the truth of existing as a mortal, being thrown through the world. So, in a sense, we could say that there is an ontological quality that depends upon the criteriological aspect, and that is that by becoming aware of this, then suddenly it is as if you are revealed to yourself. You are this is the moment of vision. You are revealed to yourself as being in time on a trajectory toward death. There is no alternative to understanding your life as finite. All other understandings are confusion and illusion, right? This is the existentialist teaching on death. Freedom and peace are not in opposition to power actualization. Understanding death enhances all three. Let's say that again a little bit slower. Freedom and peace are not in opposition to power actualization. Understanding death enhances all three. What it means to exist is understood through the contemplation of death. We talked a little bit about this when we compared existentialism with Stoicism, but what is beyond memento mori? Many philosophies and religions advocate memento mori, or remember you must die. For example, Stoicism tells us to remember we must die so that we can face our death stoically. However, existentialism goes beyond memento mori. Existentialism teaches the appropriation of the self, taking hold of one's ownmost potential, right? Recognizing one's finite position in this trajectory is the criteriological step toward taking hold of oneself ontologically. The revelation of the ontological quality that is authenticity. And in a sense, authenticity is like a sort of gestalt quality that appears when one is capable of taking hold of oneself. One becomes capable of taking hold of oneself once oneself is revealed to oneself. You can still deny it, you can still run from yourself in the face of your own death, but that's the formula for getting to the self, according to existentialism. So beyond memento mori, then, we find, I own this death. So you are always already on the way toward your own death. Your death is intimately entwined with your choices and attitude toward the fact of existing. Your death is intimately entwined with your choices and attitude toward the fact of existing. Through the contemplation of your own death, you can take hold of that which is being thrown toward death. Through the contemplation of your own death, you can take hold of that which is being thrown toward death. By doing so, you bring into focus and integrate the totality of that which is being thrown. The revelation of its mortal wholeness is yourself. This also changes the way you are, your being in time. It changes your being in time because time is revealed to you as finite. There's a kind of existential anticipation that opens the space for a resolution to resolve to be who you are. In this way, you can make your death your own. I really do think that this is a valuable talk. It's a quick talk, but it does sort of show you the way. It shows you the path to the revelation of the ontological quality that is authenticity. Initially, this seminar, this slideshow included lots of samurai philosophy from my 2017 book on Eastern existentialism, but I decided to pull that out to focus just on Kierkegaard here and to clarify Kierkegaard with the other existentialists, but then to save the samurai philosophy for another time. So I thank you for being here. Please do like and subscribe, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next seminar. Thank you.